Main maze. Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil's back on the channel. I know people really liked our Dr. Phil video, so I'm not surprised to see Dr. Phil come on back here.
The studios, and I'm sober. And then they pull me into my dressing room. There was 2 liters of vodka. Vodka, you know, being unsupervised by my parents, I drank the entire bottle.
Yeah,
Next thing you know, I'm being carried onto the stage because I can barely walk.
Is your teen out of control?
Malnourishing, humiliating, screaming at, sleep depriving.
Dr. Phil's literally kidnapping these children and sending them to these programs where he's making this money.
I never give up, even if it means tracking Gabe down in his own hometown.
Can I?
Phil, what are you doing, dude? You can't be tracking kids down. Phil, come on, man. What are you doing?
Ask for cooperation.
I'm not leaving, bro.
Dr. Phil is a daytime television monster. This man has exploited thousands of people on his show. He has invited drug addicts on and provided them with their drugs of choice before filming. Dr. Phil has also kidnapped teenagers from their own homes to send them to abusive camps. The same programs he's promoting and making money from by sending these addicts and teens to. This man is incredibly corrupt and dishonest. So let's get into it.
All right, let's see. Let's get into
Lately,
this.
I've been getting compliments everywhere I go on how great I smell. It's important for me to have...
Who's going around sniffing you, dude? What are you doing?
a good perfume or cologne.
Uh-huh. I know. It's bad. Alright.
Enjoy. We're going to be talking about one of daytime television's notorious villains, Dr. Phil. If you guys don't know who Philip McGraw is, he does have a doctorate in psychology, but he hasn't been a licensed psychologist since 2006. You guys know him as Dr. Phil, but he wasn't Dr. Phil until Oprah stepped in. Oprah first started working with Dr. Phil back in 1995 because some Texas cattle ranchers sued Oprah for defamation. So she hired Dr. Phil's consulting firm, and ultimately Oprah won. So she liked Dr. Phil after that. She was so pleased with Dr. Phil's performance, she started inviting him onto her show, and he came on as a relationship and life expert. And he came onto her show pretty often, giving advice about marriage and divorce and how to parent. But in 2002, Dr. Phil got lucky because Oprah decided to help him produce his own show. Actually, by 2008, the Dr. Phil show was doing better than Oprah's own show, so it was a success.
And,
some people would say that Dr. Phil should thank Oprah for his success, but others would say that he should thank the people he's exploited through the years, because he has taken so many vulnerable people, thrown them onto stage, and exploited their trauma for ratings. Mia Farrow tweeted out, there should be laws to protect mentally ill people from TV talk show predators like Dr. Phil, who's exploiting Shelley Duvall for his own gain. So she's referring to a specific episode where Dr. Phil had an actress named Shelley Duvall onto his show, and she was not in the right mental state.
I loved Robin Williams. I don't think he's dead.
Where do you think he is?
Shape-shifting.
It prompted stars like Mia Farrow to boycott today's episode, tweeting, there should be laws to protect mentally ill people from TV talk show predators like Dr. Phil, who is exploiting Shelley Duvall for his own gain. Meanwhile, Mia's son Ronan also sent out a series of scathing tweets at Dr. Phil, and the daughter of the Shining director Stanley Kubrick also posted an open letter on Twitter, calling the interview lurid and exploitative entertainment.
I'm glad that some people have called out Dr. Phil, but nothing has changed. And at this point, he's been doing this for
Dr. Phil makes
decades.
some money.
Every time you bring a guest on this show, you exploit them and spread whatever problems they have to the whole world.
You think that's helping him?
Yeah, keep telling yourself that.
Now back to Shelley Duvall, because Dr. Phil and his team sought her out after understanding that she wasn't doing well and was mentally struggling. So he wanted to get in there and exploit her trauma.
Will you let me get you to the doctor so you can get checked out?
If you so much as attempt to get my moon mole, I'll kill you.
That's Shelley Duvall on today's episode of Dr. Phil. A far cry from the talented actress we saw star alongside Jack Nicholson in The Shining. In the interview, Shelley makes some discomforting claims about her deceased Popeye co-star, Robin Williams.
I don't think he's dead.
I want to have you checked out by some really good doctors.
I would like that.
For free. I'll pay for
If you
it.
promise me that they won't murder me.
I promise you.
So clearly this woman is distressed. And do you think
deranged.
putting this out nationally is going to help her situation? Like, do you think promoting these rumors that, you know, Robin Williams isn't actually dead and things like this is going to help her case? Because it isn't, and Dr. Phil knows that, but he loves it for the shock value. Dr. Phil worked really hard to have Shelley on his show. She was quoted saying that she found out the kind of person he was the hard way, and she even shares that her mother didn't like him either. A lot of people said that she shouldn't have done this interview with him. After the episode went live, Dr. Phil got a lot of backlash, as he should.
What, did he take the episode
and Shelley claims that he started calling her over and over again. He actually called her mother, so now he's calling her like family members and not leaving her alone. You would think at this point he would leave her alone, but he probably wanted to have her back on, not only for ratings, but also to fix his reputation, because that wasn't cool of him. And I know he genuinely didn't want to help her, because after he films the show, he just pushes her off to, you know, some facility or some program, and she didn't really want that. So he's not there every step of the way helping these people, and ultimately Shelley got no help. She was just exploited for this interview and honestly made a mockery of, which Dr. Phil should be ashamed of.
But she refused to sign the papers or take any meds, so after 3 days, she was sent back home.
We're now working directly with Shelley's mother and are providing Shelley treatment from a group of local professionals who, due to her refusal to take medication, will use alternative methods to treat her.
Shelley even shared that her mother didn't want anything to do with Dr. Phil, so they weren't working together to
why
get her
was she
help.
on the Dr.
And that's
Phil?
not the first time that Dr. Phil has misrepresented the truth.
Of course.
We all know that Britney Spears went through it back in 2008, but a lot of people don't understand that Dr. Phil was part of this situation. I guess somehow
because her
parents
parents called Dr. Phil
and started to talk to them, and at some point actually had a conversation with Britney Spears, so he was getting close to them. Dr. Phil got himself in trouble because he decided to go onto TV on the CBS Early Show and speak about the Spears family and Britney's situation.
You can't do
but he's
that.
not like one of the family's reps, so he shouldn't be doing that. But he was motivated. He actually planned on doing a special show involving Britney, which would have been insane. But it backfired because the Spears family called him out. Lou M. Taylor actually told the Today Show that Dr. Phil crossed the line. She was quoted saying the family basically extended an invitation of trust for him to come in as a resource to support them, not to go out and make public statements.
According to him, her
why would
family
you
had
do
asked
this
him
with
to
Dr.
intervene,
Phil,
but
who's a
Britney
freaking
was
public-
not on board, and
You
after
see,
Dr.
he's
Phil
made
issued
for
public
the
statements
public.
about her family turned against him too.
What do you
the
mean?
bottom line here is that Dr. Phil no longer has a license to practice psychology because he elected to retire his license. So he has no duty, legal or ethically, to maintain confidentiality in any event.
As we all know, this episode never ended up happening. And Dr. Phil had a BS excuse. He claims that this situation's just too intense at this time, and out of consideration to the family, I've decided not to move forward. But they didn't want him to move forward. So there he is again, trying to switch up the narrative of what's really happening here. And what's scary about Dr. Phil is that he's built a reputation of like trust and helping people.
Yeah, I
like
love
for me, for
you.
instance, I
You're
like to
great.
think that like I have
You're
a trust type of like
amazing.
rapport with you guys. You know, I'm trying to put out like credible information and we're all seeking the truth. But that's just not the case for Dr. Phil. And he's convinced his fan base and his audience to trust him, and they have got themselves in trouble for doing so. Like the time that Dr. Phil promoted and sold a diet plan on his television show to his audience. He got himself in big trouble for this one. At this point, he was 56 years old, and he decided to jump into the lucrative weight loss market, which is very Oprah of him. He put out advice books, and he had a special with Katie Couric. And
why wouldn't he?
Also had some products from his line called Shape Up. Shape Up has shakes, bars, multivitamins, and I guess at some point the plan called for 22 pills a day, which is about $120 a month. They actually had to stop producing their products because the Federal Trade Commission stepped in and they wanted to launch an investigation into the science behind these products. Because you can't just make open claims and get away with it. The pills claimed that they were scientifically researched and they have ingredients that can help you change your behavior to control your weight.
Business included the usual things like shakes and energy bars, and it was peddled on air by Phil's own family members. When the testimonials are from the creator's family, you know something's fishy. The program was immediately pegged by experts as being total nonsense, and it was shelved in response to an investigation by the Federal Trade Commission.
So his products were a bunch of BS, and the people who spent all this money on them decided to sue him. In 2004,
can we be honest here?
there was a lawsuit filed, and thousands of his customers actually joined the lawsuit because it was fraudulent, that they were claiming that these pills would do something they cannot do, and also claiming that they're backed by science, which you can easily prove or disprove if they have the science to provide. It's really expensive to have research and science produced for a product, so I doubt that there's any science behind any of Dr. Phil's products. And ultimately, that's why he had to pay $10.5 million to his customers because he lied to them. But don't worry, guys, Dr. Phil did not go broke because of this, because he didn't have to pay
he has plenty of money. Why would he ever go broke?
He had some insurance that covered everything, so he walked away without any
Scot-free
problems. I mean, he probably made
expense.
a ton of money off of these products, and then the insurance covered him while he was being sued, so he really didn't lose anything at all. And that's not the first time Dr. Phil has tried to mess with our health, because at some point he became a spokesperson for a diabetes drug. First off, there's a conflict of interest because he's I guess a doctor. He's not even really a doctor, but he's now portraying a doctor for a medical product, and that's a problem because some people may not understand that Dr. Phil is not actually a medical doctor who's selling you this product. It's also really dangerous. This drug has a warning that it can increase the risk of thyroid cancer. Here's a little screenshot of some text from the actual drug information, and it claims that you can really get sick from taking this. And it actually turns out that Dr. Phil doesn't even take this drug. He does take another drug because he does have diabetes, but he's not taking the drug that he's selling. He's just getting paid for it. It kind of makes me think about that Khloe Kardashian ad for the migraine medicine. I see it all the time.
He's all about making money.
Why not? Actually takes that? Probably not. But let's talk a little bit more about Dr. Phil's show, because there have been a lot of different mistakes throughout the years which have really tarnished his reputation. He's messed with people's lives in ways that are not okay, and he was actually sued by two brothers because they were framed by Dr. Phil in an episode where he covered the missing case of Natalie Holloway, and he pretty much edited clips in a way to make these two brothers seem guilty.
The brothers later sued for defamation, stating that their segment, quote, was manipulated and later broadcast as being accurate. Specifically, the show had used a hidden camera interview edited to change their responses. The case was later dismissed only 1 week before the trial was to begin. To this day, Holloway's disappearance remains unsolved, and she was declared legally dead in absentia in 2012.
If Dr. Phil genuinely wanted to find Natalie, then why would he set up this episode to frame these two boys who are clearly innocent? I mean, there's no justice there, and of course Natalie wasn't ever found. And it looks like he wasn't even actually sued for this because the case was dismissed. We don't even really know why the case was thrown out, but there was another person named Joran who was officially named a suspect, yet there wasn't any like convictions or anything like that. So hopefully one day Natalie does get some justice for whatever happened to her. I mean, there's so much like human trafficking nowadays. Like when I see these stories of like missing people who aren't ever found,
there's a ton of human trafficking.
To God they're not. I mean, everything sounds horrible, but like human trafficking really sounds like a terrible experience. I could not imagine being in
this
that.
guy knows
Another
how to bring up the
situation
drama,
I can't
dude.
imagine being in
He's
is having Dr. Phil lock you in a room and go off on you like you're a child.
What?
His former employee named Leah was a segment director, and she actually accused Dr. Phil of false imprisonment for trapping employees in a room to threaten them over leaks to the media. So someone had gone to the press and said some things about the show that he did not like, and he just like treated his employees like his children and punished them.
A former employee named Leah Rothman sued Dr. Phil in 2016 for false imprisonment and wrongful termination. According to her, Dr. Phil grew so enraged after someone allegedly leaked information to the press that he locked employees in a meeting, screamed profanities at them, and threatened them by saying, quote, "If you f with me, I'll f with you." Rothman subsequently went to HR to discuss the issue, only for them to side with Dr. Phil. According to Rothman, she was, quote, forced to quit her job, eventually leading to the 2016 lawsuit.
So she had to leave her job, so she decided to go and sue the show and Dr. Phil for wrongful termination. Ultimately, they settled the case, so we don't know what happened there, but the show said that she was just a disgruntled employee and that everything she was saying was false, which I don't think people just make these things up. And this might be a trend for Dr. Phil because he's been accused of holding people captive more than one time. A 56-year-old woman named Shirley was on his show and a part of group therapy, and it was being filmed for a show back in 2007. She claims that she had been held captive and forced to be in the same room with a completely live naked man while he exposed his entire naked body, wiener and all. In court documents, she claims that she was actually at group therapy for her problems with men. So to be at therapy and then to have this man like expose himself and do all this and to be forced to be in that room with him, I mean, that is traumatizing alone. And it seems like Dr. Phil has a skill when it comes to pushing people closer to their problems. Not the solution, but the problems. Another 56-year-old woman, I don't know why
he knows what he's doing. He knows how to get content out of people.
This woman named Jolynn actually went onto the show for her alcohol addiction. And Dr. Phil and his producers made sure she was extremely drunk before going on stage because they're trying to make an entertaining show. I mean, how like entertaining would it be if a sober person came on to the show when they have an alcohol problem? You know, we're gonna shove alcohol in their face and make them embarrass themselves so that Dr. Phil looks like he's the savior.
Now, I'm willing to offer you some help here, but you need to look at me and you need to hear me. I know you're in there.
What?
Because I think you're still in there, and I think
what
you
a nice,
deserve a
what a
shot.
great guy Dr. Phil is.
I am here. Yeah, I am in here.
Except he provided the alcohol.
I wrote into the Dr. Phil show.
I know you did.
Praying.
You can stay with her. You can stand with her.
It's okay. Praying that you could help her.
That poor woman is clearly distraught. She doesn't have her shoes on. She's jumping out of the chair. She's stumbling. And the entire episode is really bad. I feel super sad for her. And I hope she did get the help that she needed at that time. But it doesn't seem like Dr. Phil is the best person for that.
Or provides any help at all.
That he's been accused of getting people drunk before putting them on stage. Yeah. Because there was this guy named Todd. He was actually on the show Survivor. And he appeared on the Dr. Phil show in 2013.
I remember this.
He had to literally be carried onto the stage because he was so messed up. Dr. Phil was even quoted saying that I've never talked to someone so near to death on camera before. Like, he claimed that Todd was going to die soon because his addiction was so bad. Yet Dr. Phil and his team were adding to the problem. This was a shocking episode, but when Todd arrived to the studio, he was completely sober and he was with his father. But then he went into his dressing room and there was a bottle of vodka, and then he started to drink. Then someone handed him a Xanax saying that this would help your nerves, so he took that.
So Todd Herzog was on Dr. Phil's show because he had an alcohol addiction, and he claims that after he traveled to Los Angeles to be on the show, he went into the green room and found that there was a bottle of vodka there. He also claimed that he was given drugs right before he went on air. Take a look at what he has to say.
I show up to the studios and I'm sober. I'm hurting a lot and I'm shaking. My dad was there and I went and talked to him in his dressing room and I was completely sober. And then they pull me into my dressing room and there was 2 liters of vodka and like some Red Bulls and orange juice and stuff like that. You know, being unsupervised by my parents, I drank the entire bottle. And then at some point, somebody gave me a Xanax. They said, this will calm your nerves. And so I had been drinking and took a Xanax, which I've never taken Xanax before in my life.
So Todd was set up.
How did you know
there's
Xanax?
no denying that this was a setup by Dr. Phil and his producer minions. And there's a reason why they do this, because these addiction segments are really compelling. I mean, people watch, they're interested. If you've ever seen the show Intervention, people like to see people in these distressing states. I honestly don't understand why, but it's good for ratings. I guess, like, either makes people like realize or feel empathy or make them feel better about themselves. I don't really know, but it'd be so much better if these like programs were actually intended to help people.
No, I never thought Dr. Phil was intended to help anyone.
Hi, I'm Todd.
Next thing you know,
It's
I'm
supposed to be
carried
entertainment.
onto the stage because I can barely walk.
How drunk do you think you are right now?
An entire bottle of vodka.
Keep going. 0.263. What's going to happen to you if you keep drinking like you're drinking?
I'm gonna die.
So Herzog said that, you know, he showed up to the studios completely sober. His father was with him and
What
has
does his father have
corroborated
to
that.
say? Oh, okay.
And, you know, Herzog says that he found the alcohol in the dressing room.
So Dr. Phil gets these people onto his show. He makes them look
And then gives them
terrible,
their
and
addicts.
then he pressures them to go to some program or facility to get help. But you've got to be wondering what's in it for Dr. Phil. There's a lot in it
Ad
for
revenue
Philip McGraw
and
because
ratings.
he's partners with these companies, so he's making money by sending people there and then bringing up the names of the facilities on the show. It's like free promo, and then he's just making more behind the scenes by like making these people look terrible on his show, sending them there, and then promoting these programs.
Is your teen out of control? The Aspen Education Group can help you get that teen back on track. Now, Aspen's nationwide network of programs has been featured on my show for years, and they can help your family too. Now, you can call an Aspen consultant today to learn more about their outstanding residential and outdoor programs.
That's 2
So
months
that
in
was
a
a
row?
clip of Dr. Phil
Thanks,
promoting
Kay.
Aspen, which is a troubled teen
We're on
industry,
Dr. Phil
like,
now.
facility
We're all over
program
the place
situation,
today.
which sounds terribly abusive. Aspen Education has been accused of multiple infractions by former attendees,
Wahoo.
including lawsuits that claimed psychological torture, abuse, sexual assault,
We're at
and
5
human
hours.
trafficking.
I'm dying.
These programs and others are still being promoted by Dr. Phil and on his website. And there's been a lot of troubled teen industry involved content when it comes to Dr. Phil's show. If you guys don't know what the troubled teen industry is, pretty much there are a slew of programs across the United States where these
For your
teens who are
teenagers
going
that have
through,
nothing wrong with them
unfortunate
go and they gotta
situations,
be
whether
put with a
they're
bunch of
rebelling
drugs
against their
and
parents,
stuff.
or they're dealing with, you know, childhood trauma and they don't know how to cope. Nonetheless, these kids are in bad places.
This is why
so they're
Gen
sent
Z
to an
sucks.
even worse place to try to make them better. And at these camps, they make them work, they starve them, they really just break them down. And there's not a lot of people who come out of these programs feeling better. Bad Baby has actually been super outspoken about her experience.
I'm ready to
and
see
I
Bad
really
Baby.
praise her for that.
I seen a kid get held down for trying to leave. Malnourishing, humiliating, screaming at, taken there against my will. It's basically like kidnapping. They strip you
It's like
from your
kidnapping.
whole personality. Sleep
No one should
depriving.
relate
That's
Dr. Phil
not
to kidnapping.
tough love.
Like, what the heck?
The place that she was recommended to go was abusive to her, wouldn't let her sleep.
One of the kids, he had tried to steal a car or something. Everyone was screaming on the walkies like it was really crazy, and he ended up killing one of the staff members. That's all I said, was that they wouldn't let me sleep. That's the only accusation. I just said, oh yeah, and they wouldn't let me sleep. It was so bad.
When Danielle Bergoli, aka Bad Baby, said that this is like kidnapping, I was like, holy crap. That's what it is. Like, Dr. Phil is literally kidnapping these children and sending them to these programs where he's making this money. And if you look at these videos where like they go and kidnap these like teens, it's like really scary because there are a lot of adults involved with showing up to a teenager's home at like
kidnapping
3 a.m. in the morning,
yeah,
waking them out of bed and forcing them to go to this place where they're going to be abused.
However we got here, the number one thing
I'm
is
sure
you have
there
to
ain't
save
all
her
of them
from
are abusive,
herself.
but it is kind of crazy.
Get out of my bed. Let me get out of my bed. I don't care. Get off of me. Get off of me.
Of making bad parental decisions that have put her in this position.
They're stepping on her
At
hands.
some point, you have to look back and say, I did everything I could to get her out of the life.
You're doing fantastic. No, my phone. We've got it, honey.
Clearly that girl didn't want to go to this program, and there's a great reason why, because she probably already knows what she's getting into. And that's thanks to people like Hannah Archuleta, who have been speaking out and actually sued Dr. Phil and the program she was sent to at a Utah ranch, the same one that Bad Baby went to. Hannah was on his show in October 2019, and she was sent to Turnabout Ranch.
Of course.
And at this
I heard a lot
facility,
about this
she
Turnabout
was
Ranch.
neglected. They were emotionally
They literally
abusing them,
neglected
verbally
the kids
abusing
that they
them,
were
and
taking in.
overworking them. But Dr. Phil said that Hannah needed to go to the ranch to have any chance at a good life. So clearly things didn't go well for Hannah, and you can't force help onto someone who doesn't want it, even if they are a teen. And after doing research for this video, I found a bunch of clips where Dr. Phil kidnaps these children and puts them into these programs. And here's one I found really disturbing.
But there was an unexpected turn of events, and things did not go as planned backstage, which is to be expected when you are dealing with such a sensitive issue. But I never give up, even if it means tracking Gabe down in his own hometown.
I don't know if you guys noticed that, but there's literally an ad for the rehab program right at the beginning of this clip. And when they went to go and pick up this boy who did not want to go, it did not end well. They are treating these kids like they are criminals,
and found
which
him
is
at his
not
own
the way
house.
to go about this. A lot
Leave
of them
him
are acting
alone,
out because
Phil.
they've gone through, you know, a divorce at home or some childhood trauma, and punishing them for, you know, pretty much a cry for help isn't going to solve anything.
Yeah, why aren't you normal?
We are en route to Gabe's home.
You think he's gonna freak on me?
I think he's gonna be kind of like groggy sleeping.
About why later.
Nah, I'm not going, bro.
Please.
You already know, bro. You've done this before.
We're leaving right now. Can I ask for your cooperation?
I'm not leaving, bro.
Stop resisting, Gabe. We'll loosen him in a minute.
Oh, what's up, bro? I'm not going nowhere, bro. I'm sleeping. Why you guys pull me on my outside? Going nowhere, bro.
The Dr. Phil show
They
continues
literally
to
put
cross the line by sending
handcuffs
these kids
on the man.
to these programs, taking them out of their homes.
He was
and putting them
17.
in such a terrible place. But it's not the first time that the Dr. Phil show has crossed the line, because at some point they actually bailed out a criminal because they were invested in the story. So in 2008, this girl was arrested for beating another person, and the video went viral on the internet, so Dr. Phil decided to get involved. This video got national attention because there were multiple people going after one person, and this video was posted to MySpace, and that's where I guess it went viral. Turns out that a lower level production assistant coughed up $30,000 for the bond of this girl who attacked another. When caught on camera, he told other news reporters trying to interview his prized catch that we have exclusivity. So they literally bailed out this criminal because they wanted to get the story on what had happened. And when they were like kind of confronted with it, they were like, oh no, you can't take our prize. Like, this is our treasure. We paid for this.
This is a fantastic example of the show chasing guests. Back in 2008, a producer for the show bailed teenager Mercedes Nichols out of jail for $30,000. Nichols was one of 8 teenagers who had been arrested after viciously beating another teenager and filming the altercation.
Supposedly they updated their policies after this, but that's just like a bunch of corporate lingo for, you know, we're gonna act like it didn't happen.
The show decided to drop Nichols from their program following a public outcry. According to the show's spokeswoman, quote, certain staff members went beyond the show's guidelines in bailing a criminal out of jail. Terry also stated that the employees were spoken to and that the show's guidelines were reiterated. So nothing really happened then?
But something I was surprised about was how often Dr. Phil's son is also involved in lawsuits. Jay McGraw was sued by a fitness instructor named Holly, who created a gym program geared towards women called Pink Iron. Holly claims that Jay approached her and wanted to license her brand for next to nothing in exchange for a ton of publicity on his father's show. Holly claims that Jay promised that my dad will market the shit out of Pink Iron. So she actually agreed to the deal because, like, Dr. Phil promoting your gym all the time, I mean, that sounds great. The deal was all set in place, but then Jay backed out and partnered with a different company called
Probably because Dr. Phil's insane.
And it actually seems like he took Holly's business idea and then just stole it and called it Pink Method and acted like it was his own. So she sued him for breach of contract. It sounds like they settled
and then he got away with it
to that case, but there's another case I found that involves his son, which really mimics how Dr. Phil behaves. Dr. Phil's son, Jay McGraw, accused of humiliating guests on TV show, which, father like son, huh? Dr. Phil's son has been accused of destroying a man's life after tricking him onto his show to exploit a condition that left him with a disfigured penis. His name is Tyler, and he's 24, and he went to Jay's production company called Stage 29. It looks like Jay convinced Tyler to go onto the show The Doctors and would pay for his surgery onto his wiener, God, it's so. If he were to go onto the show, yeah, and do an appearance. So we'll fix what's going on down there if you come onto this program and pretty much embarrass yourself, which he did ultimately agree to. But Tyler actually filed this lawsuit because Jay went against some HIPAA violations because I guess he like took this condition and ran with it to the production teams and really tried to pitch what was going on with Tyler. I'm glad that he went and sued because they really did embarrass him. They created a fake letter that he supposedly wrote to get onto the show, and they really judged up the story to make it worse for him. So I'm glad that he's defending himself.
They gotta make a show, right? They gotta make people look bad.
I do want to mention that Dr. Phil has a weird house. He has a $5 million home that has a staircase with snakes on it, and he has a dining room with guns in it, and just like super weird decor. So I want to share that with you guys in case you haven't seen it before. Definitely check out that link in my description below for Simford.
All right, that's it. All right, Dr. Phil, we all knew he was strange, he was awkward, he did some bad things. Yeah. Like, people, you can't take people at face value. Okay. We all knew Dr. Phil was a pretty bad guy. He's just an actor now.